which is sitting down and standing up. So you can mind stage. All right. Yes. Was it good? Yes. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Meet the Candidates, meeting in this Botany Electorate this evening. And I just want to thank you for this great turnout and your presence here this evening as one of our guests. This event is sponsored by our church's Life Growth Community Trust, in which I chair and I'm the director of, which has been organizing candidates events in our area since 2004. We are pleased as a church to make available our facilities for such an important public meeting and to welcome you to this space. So please make yourselves at home. The Life Growth Community Trust organizes a range of programs, including free English classes, 2 community youth workers placed at Edgewater College, one that I'm very fond of because she happens to be my wife, play groups for care providers and their children, Father's Day community events, and our Christmas and Burstwood, and these election forums for Meet the Candidates. Having served in Auckland in pastoral ministry for more than 5 years, once in a placement down in Papakura and right here at East City Wesleyan, I've certainly become familiar with a wide variety of needs in our community. And so I very much look forward to tonight with Naisi Chen and Christopher Luxon to share with us this evening, and I welcome you both. I want to acknowledge our partnership tonight with the Times newspaper and their presence here this evening to cover our event, as well as sharing our live stream to many people who could not make it out this evening. I'm thankful that we're able to meet tonight in this forum, but it is unfortunate that we have to cap such an event at 100 people to meet all COVID-19 guidelines and regulations. In response to that, many will miss out. So we welcome many of them on our live stream found at East City Wesleyan's YouTube channel right now, and already many people streaming it online. So welcome to you all that are tuning in online, and welcome to our guests here this evening. If you want to rewatch tonight's debate, you can go to the YouTube channel where that video can be replayed tonight, tomorrow, and for the rest of this week. If you'd like to submit a question in tonight's forum, and the audience that's also watching, they can participate and interact as well, that there is a web link through a program called Zeetings. And if you go to meetthecandidates.live, even here tonight on your smartphone, or if you have an iPad tucked away in there, you can submit it to our guys in the back on the computer so that when it comes to the Q&A time, we can go through as many questions as possible. We won't get to them all, but we can select some and put them on the screen. Or for those of you in attendance, we have pieces of paper and pens that you can write and submit your questions. For those in attendance tonight, thank you for signing in, and we know that many political gatherings consist of shaking hands and kissing babies. Perhaps we can refrain from such instances with the time and space that we find ourselves in, and we can offer some waves, some elbow bumps, some thumbs up, and words of affirmation to one another and our candidates. You also find hand sanitizer in many convenient locations around the premises. If you need the toilets, they're through the back door to your left, and our emergency exits right where all the kids are standing and the door that you came in. Let's hope we don't need those exits for an emergency. So welcome to this important Meet the Candidates evening, and now it is my pleasure to invite Reverend Dr. Llyod Wong to introduce our moderator tonight and to share our prayer blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Josh, and good evening, everyone. Before I offer a prayer of blessing and we sing the national anthem, I want to tell you just briefly on behalf of the National Church Leaders Meeting, that's all the denominational leaders, Catholic and Protestant here in New Zealand, that on their behalf I released a statement today on the end-of-life choice referendum. And as outgoing chairman of the National Church Leaders Meeting these past 8 years, I can tell you there's a great unity about the sanctity of life. And there are copies of the statement there available in the foyer you can pick up after the meeting. So this election, we certainly have much to consider and to be well informed about from many different perspectives, including the wisdom from all the church leaders together. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight our moderator, Mr. Llyod Wong. And some of you will know Llyod, and for those of you who don't, let me give you a little brief introduction. Llyod's proud to be an NZBC, a New Zealand-born Chinese. He told me this, born in an idyllic Christchurch long before the earthquakes. And after stints in beautiful Nelson and windy Wellington, Llyod is very much a coffee-drinking Aucklander, working now as a consultant in the financial services area with a background in law, regulatory and corporate trusts work. Llyod has lived in Botany for almost 20 years and hosted the first of our Meet the Candidate meetings in 2008 when Botany became a new electorate 12 years ago. Since then, he's regularly moderated many mayoral, local and central government candidate events, and just last weekend moderated the meeting of the candidates in the new Takanini electorate with the intention of sort of fine-tuning himself for tonight. So thank you, Llyod. Thank you, Llyod, for your preparation work and leadership, which we appreciate. Come now to our prayer of blessing and the national anthem, and we welcome a number of school children who had to don tonight their school uniforms in the holidays. That's pretty tough, isn't it? So I'm going to ask them to just come forward. Why don't we give them a little encouragement before they lead us into singing? And they tell me they represent 5 schools in our area. Isn't that just wonderful? Would you like to stand with me, please, for the prayer, and we remain standing for the national anthem. Let us pray. Creator God, giver of all life and every culture and every language, we acknowledge your presence with us, giving us the privilege of living in body, mind and spirit. We thank you for the many blessings we have in our nation and here in this Botany community, despite these demanding times. Help us in our words and actions to be a blessing to many. And we pray for our candidates, Christopher and Naisi, for their willingness to stand before the public and offer their time and talents. We pray for good health for them and their families. Oh God, bless our community and the freedoms and the liberties we enjoy, and may we not squander these years of peace in selfish living, but instead use them in the pursuit of faith and hope and peace and justice, all best expressed in Jesus Christ. In his name, amen. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazing that 3 years can run by so quickly. We've got two new faces here representing National and Labour, or Labour and National. And I suppose as the Prime Minister says, let's keep moving. So we'll keep moving. The forum format and the rules are quite straightforward. 1, you're not allowed to heckle. 2, no personal attacks. And 3, no swearing. Unfortunately, a prior engagement over the weekend, there was all 3 of those, and I hadn't mentioned them in the forum rules. So, so quite interesting. But this audience, upstanding audience and voters, we appreciate if you moderate it and ask questions as appropriately as you should. Okay, so what's the format look like tonight? We're just going to have a quick look at the current state of government. Then we're going to ask the candidates for some opening statements. They'll get a chance to talk about their party policies. And we've got some public questions which we received in advance of this meeting. Plus also, we want the audience, the forum audience, to interact and participate. So we're going to ask you for your questions as well. If you feel a bit shy or you want to write your questions down, I think Warren's going to pass a slip of paper around at some stage. You're going to have to use your own pen because that's appropriate. But Warren will pick up the questions or the slips of paper and we'll hopefully be able to ask most of those questions. And then we've got the candidates' closing statements and most importantly of all, refreshments afterwards for you to mix and mingle with the candidates. Okay, so just moving to the next slide. It's a bit hard to see. I can see it is a bit hard to see, but basically it shows you what the current state is, which is Labour leads a coalition government, National, which actually won 44% of the votes and have 56 seats in Parliament, were surprisingly left out by Winston Peters when he decided to join up with Labour and the Greens. I should say surprisingly in quotes because nothing that Winston Peters does should surprise us. And so that's the current state. What's the future state going to look like? Perhaps we can go to the next slide. Nobody quite knows, of course. October the 17th will hopefully inform us more. But of course, there will be some jockeying for positions afterwards where there might be a need for a coalition. Now this graph, which is not very easy to see, I know, but shows the red line trending up at over 55 and the blue line trending down at somewhere around 25. But that was about a month ago. And as you all know, the current scenario is completely different or has changed. And that red line and that blue line are coming together, which is probably what we would expect in most elections as we come closer. The mix of lines at the bottom represent the minority parties. The green and the yellow are probably the 2 lines that you should take notice of. The Greens and the ACT, being the yellow line, they're touching 8%, I think, in the polls at the moment, which might mean they get up to about 10 seats, 9 or 10 seats in Parliament. So if that holds true, what we're saying, of course, is that the party that's leading at the moment in the polls probably won't be able to govern alone. It will need a partner. However, I'm sure that the people in blue will have something to say about that, and hopefully we'll hear about that from them shortly. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. So what's the aim of tonight? Well, basically, we've got 2 candidates, the National and the Labour, or the Labour and the National, and we want to take them for a spin. We want you, if borrowing that automotive term, to be able to lift the hood, lift the bonnet, check the engine's running right, check out what some of their values, and check out what drives them. So that's the purpose for tonight, and hopefully by the end of tonight you'll have a lot more insight into these two candidates. And I have to say, as I do every election Meet the Candidates evening, that they are very brave to stand. Not everybody wants to be a politician, I know that, but clearly these two are cut from a different ilk or different silk, and they will, as you will find out, be really good representatives for Botany. Yes. Good question, Richard. Good question. I suppose the answer would be threefold. First, when we organise this, we're quite strategic in who we actually invite. We don't want to invite the 6 candidates that are standing at the moment. One of them's dropped away, of course, but I think there's 6, including New Conservatives, Sustainable New Zealand, and ACT. So what we believe in is getting value for your entry fee, which is your precious time. And what we're saying there is that if you have 6 candidates lined up, then you're only going to get a soundbite from each of them. And that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear perhaps some in-depth stuff. So hopefully we'll get some of that. Secondly, when we looked at the candidates, the one that probably appealed the most would have been Damien Smith from ACT. However, we also know that he doesn't live in Botany, he lives in Ōrākei. He's only interested in the party vote, not the electorate vote. And also, his only connection with Botany is the fact that he, when he arrived, I think as a migrant from the UK, he stayed in Botany, or it was his first stop before he moved on. So the second reason wasn't very appealing. And then the third reason is that the quality of our candidates, the 2 that we've got here at the moment, is quite overwhelming in terms of the fact that we're likely to see one of them as the electorate MP and the other one is likely to be a list MP. So we're likely to get 2 candidates from Botany in Parliament, and so it's important that they share, or we share, as much time with them as possible. So having a couple of minor parties or whatever up here, I don't think will benefit anybody. So those are the reasons, Richard, and thank you for asking the question. Thank you. Okay, so finally, we get to meet the candidates. Right? So if we can ask perhaps for an opening statement, and what we've told Naisi and Christopher is that they can have up to 5 minutes. Do we have the benefit of a buzzer, gentlemen? We do. Normally a buzzer will sound with 30 seconds to go, and then when your time's up, a couple of buzzers will go. And that's all part of keeping the politician restrained. It's very difficult normally. As you know, they'll talk for as long as you let them. So, Naisi, yours.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Naisi Chen in our hope. So hi everyone, my name's Naisi Chen. It's an absolute pleasure to represent the Labour Party, but also to be in the... Okay, I should turn home. There we go. Is that... There we go. Do I get my 5 minutes from now? Cool. Okay. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. ko Naisi Chen i ngā hau. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be with all of you here, especially now that we're in level 2, and to be representing the Labour Party and to be on this ground here in Botany. For me, it's been a really, really long journey coming outside to the east, but for me, it's really cool to be amongst a community that is so diverse as this electorate. I came to New Zealand when I was 5 years old, so not quite a born in New Zealand Chinese, but I do call myself a Chiwi, a Chinese Kiwi, or a lot of people would refer to us as lots of Kiwi Asians and all that, and I'm really, really proud to identify myself as someone with a third culture, meaning I am very well connected with my own culture, which is the Chinese culture, but also I think New Zealand and being a Kiwi is something that I really take pride in, so we've developed something called the third culture. Now, growing up in New Zealand has been just a really, really, really lucky, I think, journey for me that my parents happened to choose this beautiful country. My parents came to New Zealand for want of a better life, and that's exactly what we found in New Zealand. I get to spend time with my parents, who my dad used to work in. Actually, both my parents are Chinese doctors. They used to work in one of the biggest hospitals in China. And since then, they've come to New Zealand and started their own acupuncture clinics. And actually, about 5 years ago, my dad actually became a full-time pastor of a Chinese church. And so it's been a really, really life-changing journey since we've moved to New Zealand. And for me, to grow up in New Zealand, to go to uni, and to experience what everything that New Zealand has to offer has just been something that I really want to propel for our next generation, that I want to make sure that we maintain that going forward. I've had the privilege of starting my own business in New Zealand. I run a business consultancy that specializes in HR and employment law. I'm also sitting on the board of Foundation North at the moment, which is a real privilege to actually connect with a lot of the community groups and those NGOs and charities who are at the front end of actually doing all the work with the most vulnerable communities and with some of those communities that are most at risk. I'm also on the board of Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra, so orchestral music is one of my biggest passions in life. I played double bass and I did conducting in uni, and so it's really great to be able to give back to the music community through this way. And also I'm also on the board of Aotearoa Legal Support Foundation, which is about providing legal support to the newest immigrants coming into New Zealand, especially if they speak Chinese, because we see a huge descent. So through my work in the community and through the work that I do professionally, I see lots and lots of people that are being marginalised as this community or as our country moves forward. And I want to make sure that everyone gets a fair chance in New Zealand, that they really realise their Kiwi dream like my family and I were able to. And also, I think it's also about looking after the next generation as well. So I'm 26 this year, and I can't afford a house at the moment. And I really care about the environmental issues as well. So I do want to leave really, really clean rivers, not just even for my next generation, just for myself to be able to enjoy, and to make sure that we invest in people, in environment, in jobs, in education, so that when New Zealand comes to the next 30 years, the next 50 years comes around, we are able to enjoy the same things that we do, and with the advancement of technology and with the help of innovation to get us to actually a better place so that no one gets left behind. And so that's why I decided to run for Labour. In 2017, I had the privilege already to run in one election, so this is my second time. But what I've found is just that this journey of being called brave, I think, is a real honour. But for me, it's about really connecting with everyone, with Taunta Whenua, with our Pacifica community, with everyone here, like all of you tonight. And it's just a real honour to hear your questions and to know what everyone is experiencing and what they care about in this community. And so I guess that is my commitment to all of you, is that if I had the privilege of representing Botany, then I would make sure to represent everyone within our community, to bring us all together, all the diversity and all of every different age group, to make sure that we all come together and really build Botany into the best electorate in this country. Thank you, everyone.
Christopher?
O inga mana, inga reo, inga roranga tira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Well, kia ora, good evening, everyone. Can I just say thank you to the Life Growth Community Trust for hosting us here this evening? Can I say thank you to Naisi? It's going to be great to share a stage with you discussing some important issues. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet or don't know my story, I was born in Christchurch. I moved to Cockle Bay because of my father's job. He was a national sales manager for a company called Johnson & Johnson. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, but we smelled terrific because we were covered in talcum powder and baby lotion. And would you believe it, I used to use Johnson's baby shampoo at one point in my life as well. But I came here, I went to Star of the Sea Convent School, Cockle Bay Primary, Howick Intermediate, St Kent's and Howick College, and so I feel really connected to this area. And in fact, I wouldn't have run anywhere else in the country because I wanted to run here and represent Botany. Because it's actually Botany that made me. It grounded me in a set of values that actually served me incredibly well throughout the rest of my life. I had young parents, but they gave us a classic Kiwi middle-class upbringing. And I think that story is common to all of us here in this room, that everybody who has come to Botany has worked incredibly hard to get here. Whether you've been here 40 years or whether you've been here 4 years, everybody has had ambition and aspiration to get ahead for themselves, for their family, and for their community. And I think that's the story that I feel I've lived as well. A boy from Botany who's been successful because I've been able to take the opportunities that I had. I was the first ever to go to university in my family, where I did a Masters of Commerce and Business Administration. I joined one of the world's largest companies, and I spent 16 of the next 18 years overseas in Sydney, London, Chicago, Toronto, and New York. And then I came back to New Zealand to run Air New Zealand. A fantastic job, a very tough and complex job, trying to run an airline from New Zealand for 8 years. But we did some incredible things as a team, working together to get really good commercial results, customer results, and ultimately to build a great team with awesome culture. I think out of that experience, you actually start to get involved in more New Zealand Inc. activity. From a personal point of view, I'm married to Amanda, who I met when I was 15. We started dating at 19, and we've been married since I was 23, which is 26 years ago. We have 2 children, William and Olivia. And as a family, we're involved in a whole bunch of community causes, but in recent years, our big focus has been focusing on modern slavery. And whether you know it or not, but there are 40 million people enslaved in the world. And so we've been working as a family unit, going to different parts of the world, supporting different programs, building houses for rescued kids, doing a bunch of things like that as a family. And we've done it as a unit because it actually gives us something to do together as a team. The big question I've had over the last 10 months is, Chris, why have you left the life that you were part of to be able to come into politics? And the answer is pretty simple. When you live overseas for 16 years and you see the good and the bad of all the different countries and the political systems, you start to appreciate how special New Zealand actually really is. That out there in the world of 195 other countries and 7.8 billion people, the world needs New Zealand to continue to punch above its weight. And yet we face ahead of us some really scary challenges, but we also have some tremendous opportunities to realise in the next 30 years together as well. And so I want to go to work working strategically on some of those big challenges and opportunities that we have. And I guess when you've come from a business and a leadership background, I've realised a lot of the skills are transferable from a commercial world or a community world into a political world. Because the ability to be able to set a vision and be able to inspire people to want to work together on making that become a reality is really important. The ability to solve problems, and you only get the hard problems, all the easier ones get solved further down the organisation. The ability to work with a really diverse set of people who are interested in the cause of the organisation. And most importantly, the ability to get things done through, with, and for people. And I think that's the thing that I observe most from observing politics from the outside. I'm not a career politician. I'm not someone who's been involved in student body politics, who's been a wannabe MP or minister for a long period of time to become a staff or an advisor, to become the MP or to become the minister. And I think that's important, that you come to this political career having achieved some things, having had some real world experience and along the way and perspective. And that's what I want to bring to Parliament. And finally, what I'd say is I spent the last 10 months, every day of the last 10 months, going all across this electorate, meeting people who are involved in a whole bunch of community activity. And what you're struck by is just good people doing the right thing for the right reasons. And surely my job is not a politician, it's about being a public servant, as John F. Kennedy said. How do you put voice and volume to what people are trying to do and get more influence so that we can actually build stronger communities? So that's why I'm here tonight, and I'm looking forward to the questions and the discussion that we'll have.
That was pretty articulate, Christopher and Naisi. That was 5 minutes that went by pretty quickly for each of you, so well done. I think that we're pretty impressed, I think, with first impressions, and first impressions are really important. So, next slide. For those of you who don't sit within those boundaries of botany, you're probably missing out on MasterChef at the moment, but thank you for coming if you aren't in the Botany Electorate, and for those of you who are, I want to ask you a question. The question is, How many of you are undecided about who you're going to vote for on October the 17th? So just a show of hands, perhaps, for those who are undecided. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So at least the double figures here. So, and that's wonderful, that you want to come along and support your candidates. And for those of you who are undecided, we're going to come back to you at the end of the evening and ask whether or not the candidates have helped you decide who you're going to vote for. So keep up the good work. There's good work for you to do. Okay, and the next slide. Another question. Do you want to hear from the candidates how they're going to vote in the referendum? Okay, so you've been backed into a corner, Christopher and Naisi. So we've got a couple of referendums within the 2020 election pack. And as you know, the first one is the End of Life Choice Act referendum. And the second one is the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use. Richard has made mention of the joint statement by the national leaders of most New Zealand church denominations that's available outside. It makes for interesting reading, sensible reading, so I urge you to read those. Okay, but more importantly, what we'd like to know is from Naisi and Christopher what their positions are regarding the End of Life Choice Act. So would you vote yes or no? Naisi?
Just to start off with, this is completely my own personal decision because our party doesn't have a party position on it and we don't support either or, and so we're not here to influence anyone's decision. This is completely my own, but for End of Life Choice, well, I am against it at the moment.
So that's a no.
Yes.
All right.
Well, no.
And the party has no
position on it.
Great. Christopher, the End of Life Choice Act?
Yeah, there we go. Our party doesn't have a formal position on it either, but I'm voting no for it for a number of reasons. The first is I think there's a lot of risk around the coercion provisions that I see there. I'd also like to see us spend a lot more on really high quality palliative care, and just as a pro-life person, it's not something that I can support.
Great, thank you. Then the second referendum, the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use. Christopher?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Our party's actually voting no on this, and I fully support that. And I do so for 3 reasons, and some of you have heard me say this before, but when I left Air New Zealand, I was approached by several big global cannabis companies to come and be their CEO in California and Australia. And the reality is, I know why they want me. They want me to go build a market and expand product usage and create lots of new products to be able to do that. The second thing I'd say as a former CEO of Air New Zealand in a safety-sensitive industry, we can easily tell when someone's affected or impacted by alcohol because it stays in your system for 2 days. But marijuana stays in a system for 3 weeks. And you just don't want to have an accident, whether it be in fishing or forestry or construction or aviation, and then after the event start to talk about why that was a problem. And I think finally, the third thing I'd say is we've got challenges in this country around mental health and suicide and young people and motivation. And I think it's just wrong to load our people up and wipe a generation off by legalising marijuana.
Thank you. Naisi?
And so my personal, and once again, our party doesn't have a formal position on it, and this is completely my own, and your vote is just as important as mine. But I do support it, and probably for the same reasons. And the reason being is that we do have a really, really, really bad problem of cannabis use in this country right now already. 80% of New Zealand adults would have tried cannabis once they've gotten to 25 years old. And so there is a lot of problems. I was working in all of the New Zealand district courts, being a court-appointed interpreter during my whole entire uni law school years, and I've seen lots and lots of people being unfairly persecuted. If you can't pay for bail, then you can't get out. And so there's a lot of social inequalities, and so by actually regulating it and taking that power away from the gangs, we actually try to solve that problem. And obviously there's going to be more control around government regulation around production and around promotion as well, so we can all regulate that instead of being really, really dangerous.
Right, thank you, Naisi. So, end of life choice for both of them? No. And then for legalisation of cannabis for recreational use, Naisi says yes, and Christopher says no. So you don't get away free. Let's ask the audience what their vote would be if you've decided. So who would vote no for end-of-life choice? All right, thank you. And who would vote no for the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use? Okay, thank you very much for sharing. All right, so we move on now to the next slide, which is about party policies. We've got about 7 different sectors that we want to cover, so hopefully our candidates have got a very strong memory, and we'll be able to cover this. They haven't been told what we're going to cover, but the first one, the first area, is an obvious one, which is COVID-19 and economic recovery management. Can I just frame this for you, and perhaps we can get Christopher to talk first, and then Naisi. On the 22nd of September, the Prime Minister insisted our recovery is on track to be better than Australia's. This is despite New Zealand's GDP, the gross domestic product, falling 12% compared to Australia's 7% in the most recent June quarter. The Prime Minister said that all the signs are that we are going to have a sharp recovery. Christopher, in terms of the economic recovery management, do you agree with that? And what are your comments in this area? So you've got 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, look, COVID's been a tough situation for all of us to deal with because it's impacted people unevenly across the economy. What I'd say is that we're all going through quite a bit of change. At a personal level, you know, we've lost our ability to make relationships and keep our relationships as we've wanted over the last year. We've had changes to the structure of our days, and importantly, we've lost control of what we think is our future. And so emotionally, there's quite a lot going on for people as well. But it's in that context that we actually have to deliver a really strong health response, and we also then have to open up and drive our economy. And what I'd say is we've done relatively well in the world, but actually if we want to be the world's best, we've got to look at a place like Taiwan. 25 million people, 10 deaths. And so what we're arguing is there's a number of things that we could tighten up, sharpen up. It could be one consolidated agency managing the health risk at the border. It certainly would be, you know, contact tracing, the use of Bluetooth technology. Just really step up and continuously improve each of the component parts around our border security. Once we've got that right, then we can prioritise and actually start to open up our economy, but we only do it once it's safe. Without doubt, the biggest issue we are going to face is our economic performance going forward. And the economy is not dry and abstract, it's actually about real people doing real things. And we see that out here in East Tamaki. We have 2,000 businesses generating $3.5 billion, employing 30,000 people. Lots of small, medium enterprises with 15 employees or more. And the biggest issue is that the reality is, confronting as it is that we have 200,000 people on unemployment right here today. And we could have another 200,000 people joining those queues in the next year, and we owe it to those people to do everything we can right here, right now, to find them a good job. That's the priority. Everything else we discuss tonight, frankly, won't really matter. That's what's going to really matter as we go forward. And so for us, we believe fundamentally it's not well-intentioned ministers doing make work programs. It's actually going to be private enterprise. It's the hundreds of businesses that I've visited in the last 10 months. Some of you would have seen me do videos on Facebook with those businesses that are going to power us out of this challenge. And so we need actually a common, consistent set of policies that encourage business to invest and expand, and importantly, to hire that one extra person. If we could get the 2,000 businesses in East Tamaki to take on one extra person, that's really what this is all about. It's about jobs. So we have a long road to go because this thing's going to keep hitting us in waves over the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to keep knocking us about, and we've got to deliver a strong health response and, a really good economic growth and story and performance.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually right now live in, we say it's a 1 in 100 year crisis. It's been one of the worst recession downturns since World War II, which I wasn't alive back then. But there is a lot of challenges ahead. But look, through every single crisis, there is also an opportunity. And for me, if we talk about just the recovery management at the moment and with the economy, there is a real opportunity to rebuild our economy that is for the future. And so that's where I think the Labour vision becomes really, really important, that this economy, our New Zealand economy, comes out actually stronger than what it was going into COVID. So first of all, we started with a really, really strong health response. We closed down our borders, we shut down schools, actually within the first 4 weeks of getting our first case into our country. And so that was actually the fastest moving shutdown in the whole entire world. And so what else we've been doing is also actually, there's a lot of details in border control that you don't know until you get there. There's no playbook for managing COVID. Things like actually paying our security guards a living wage makes a huge difference so that they stay alert when they're there at all of the hotels. But if we talk about the next step for recovery, we have a really, really good plan to put us in front of everyone else, and that's Labour's 5-point plan. And the first part of that is creating jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Jobs right, centre and left. And so what that means is what the Prime Minister has coined actually the double whammy. It's jobs that really make our country a better place, like cleaning up the rivers, 11,000 jobs for the environment, but also it also creates that employment opportunity so people are able to transition. And what we've seen is the tourism sector, actually a lot of people who've lost their jobs from COVID be able to transition into those environmental jobs so that they can be doing something for the planet as well as saving, as well as getting income. But also it's about investing in our people. It's about the children. It's about our next generation. And it's about creating the right amount of skill sets in our economy. But then also it's about investing in the future. It's about making sure that all of our businesses are tech ready, they're innovative, that they really get to be entrepreneur and be forward thinking. Then it's backing our small businesses, whether that's a small business loans, whether that's targeted funding, and whether that's our wage subsidy. It's to make sure that our SMEs are fully supported through this recovery. And finally, it's global positioning. A lot of talks and negotiations are already underway from our government to make sure that we are positioned with FTAs and other trade agreements with countries like Singapore, like Brexit, Britain after Brexit, so that we're ready to really start trading once COVID. Actually, we were already trading. We've hit a historical high for wine. There we go. That's a good place to end on.
I think, yeah. I think this is a really critical issue, and it is actually worth going a bit deeper around it, right? Because it is actually the preeminent sort of issue of our election here. There is a big difference between the two parties in terms of how we believe we should actually power out of this. From my perspective, Labour is about doing a lot of government spending. It's a lot of intentional, theoretical, good, make-do sort of work programs, which is lovely, but a lot of wasteful spending, to be honest. There's actually more debt, and there's an increase in taxes. And I think what we believe fundamentally is it's not going to be government making work with programs that are actually going to power people out. They're all really good ideas. But frankly, when you want to go add another public holiday, when you want to go put another 5 days of sick leave, when you want to be able to increase the minimum wage, they're all lovely things. And Naisi and I would both agree we'd love to do those things. But when the economy's just collapsed by 12%, one of the biggest collapse in the quarter, Australia fell 7%, remember, we've got to get really, really practical on the must-do stuff rather than all the nice-to-do stuff for here and now.
And that's where I think tax cuts becomes really, really dangerous and actually really, really reckless in this kind of environment. You don't give tax cuts to the wealthy, to the people that are already earning over 6 digits. They're not going to be the ones who are spending. It's actually going to be the people on minimum wage who any money that you give them are able, they have a more propensity to actually consume. And so that's why through that kind of, for Labour to actually just get the highest income people to help us a little out to return that debt, right? And then that way we're able to return the debt faster and also actually to get the economy moving so people spend more.
Yeah, and all I'd say to you is I think, our plan is about a short-term tax stimulus in the short term to get your money back to you to make the decision about what you want to do with it.
All right, can we just cut you off there, Christopher? So we're just going to change the format tonight just a wee bit. What we're going to do is pose these questions. We're going to have a little bit of a debate like the two of them have initiated. So you can speak for 2.5 minutes. Then the first person gets a chance to have a right of reply, and then the other person gets a chance to respond, and perhaps only 30 seconds for that second time round. But I think you've created quite a nice format, just instinctively, so we'll carry that through. And no doubt there'll be some questions from the audience around economy and economic management later on, so you might get another chance to reprise your policies. Okay, the second one is housing supply and affordability. In 2017, the Roy Morgan Research Survey ranked this the #1 issue in New Zealand. The Prime Minister, once again, said on the news on News Hub that Kiwi Build was not very successful. When I looked at the 2020 May budget,
That is quite an understatement, right? Yeah, just putting it out there.
Can I say, when I looked at the 2020 May budget, there was a $3 billion infrastructure spend proposed with an extra 8,000 new public house build program. So there's a big difference between what they promised in 2017 and what they're talking about now. So perhaps over to Maisie to talk that through for 2.5 minutes, and then for Christopher to have his say, and then Maisie to close.
Yeah, so 3 years ago, we came into government and actually inherited one of the worst housing crises. I'm sure your children and people like myself are unable to buy a house without their parents helping them out, or, with some sort of really extraordinary amounts of wealth and high income. And so at the moment, this housing crisis, there's actually many folds to the housing crisis. There's the homeless, though, the people that are most at risk at the moment, and that is connected to mental health issues, it's connected to community, it's connected to family, and then there's people like myself, young people who are unable to afford homes, their very first home. It's a Kiwi dream to own a home, and I think seeing my parents work their way into their first home has been absolutely amazing, but I'm not able to do that at the moment. And then there's also rental property as well, and so there's all these different problems that we had to tackle. And so starting with the most at-risk place, that Labour Party has already built 5,000 new homes for state housing and also transitional housing, and we vow to do to 8,000 more next in the next government as well. And so that makes us one of the biggest public housing builders, or the governments of the public housing building in history. And so that's really, really, really big step for us, rather than selling off our state-owned houses as the previous government did. But also it's about making homes more affordable. So that's why we've now readjusted, and we've now moved on to the new progressional ownership home ownership scheme. And so that's an equity buyout, so you can rent to buy, and so that helps young people like myself to get onto the housing ladder. We've banned overseas speculation. We've now brought in our Healthy Homes Rental Act as well, and so that we can make sure that every tenant gets a warm and healthy and dry home, so that they can create a home out of that house that they rent. And so it's really, really important that we start to solve this housing crisis at every single step of it. And also we've vowed now to reform the IMA as well, to make sure that that act is fit for purpose. And we've also actually made it possible for people to actually build minor dwellings and also do minor changes to their homes without consent. And so that is all the issues that we're dealing with at the moment. Of course, it's also training young people to be builders, to be carpenters, to be plumbers and electricians, so that the supply end of the labour market to build the house gets cheaper and cheaper, and there's more and more people there, so that supply side is no longer a strain to our economy as well.
No doubt about it, housing's a major issue, and under this government, values of houses have gone up 27%, and rents per week have increased by $50. So you've got to look at the Kiwi Build experience, and the Labour government actually experienced exactly the problem, which was they had a big ambition of 100,000 homes. They've ended up building, I think it's about 400. But the reality was, irrespective of all of that, the real core problem here is that in a country the same size as the United Kingdom and Japan in land size, with only 5 million people here on a good day, we can't get enough supply of houses as a big problem. And the single biggest reason for that is this Resource Management Act. It was created in 1991. It's now 800 pages long. It's had 18 different amendments, and there's a whole industry around it. You know how difficult it is when you want to get an extension done to your house. Goodness, we know how difficult it is actually just trying to build a 7K bus line from Panmure to Botany over 20 years because we spent the 3 of the first 4 years just consulting and consenting stuff. So we want to blow it up, we want to repeal it completely, break it into an environmental standards piece of legislation, and then break it into an urban development and planning piece of legislation. This government, we talked about doing that in 2018. They formed a working group, and we've just lost 2 or 3 years doing the same thing, with the recommendation being exactly that. So that's the first thing we've got to work on, is the supply side of it. On the demand side, and Naisi's right, there's probably 3 pieces to it. There's affordability. We started the Kiwi Start program. There's rent-to-buy programs, particularly with state tenants would be an interesting thing to explore. On rentals, this Residential Tenancies Act has overreached. When a tenant who's invested their own money in buying a property, and they're not rich people, this is someone who might be their retirement or superannuation plan, has actually bought a rental property and now can't kick a bad tenant out, when the tenant can make alterations to their place, all of those things are adding cost, and they are a big disincentive for someone to be a landlord going forward, which will lead to further rise and increase in rates. Now, that's not an excuse. We want healthy homes. We started that initiative, and we should continue to do that, because we definitely don't want slum landlords. That's totally unacceptable. And then when we think about the homeless, there's ways in which that we could maybe do dollar-for-dollar matches with homeless shelters and other things that we need to explore. So it's a complicated issue, but it needs to get to root cause, and you need to, like we do in business, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and let's do that. Let's stop band-aiding and number 8 wiring stuff that doesn't work, and at least be bolder and have the courage to go turn it upside down and try again.
I think to get to the root of the cause is firstly probably admitting that there is a housing crisis, which by the end of the last national government in 2017, they never admitted that there was a housing crisis, and they were still selling off state homes. And so I think that's really, really important that we actually recognise that New Zealand has a huge problem in our housing supply market, and that we need to start doing something about it. It's also about making sure that the most vulnerable are being looked after. That includes properly funding NGOs that provide social housing and housing services, and to also wrap around support around the most vulnerable people in our communities as well. And so it's to make sure that all of that gets done together in a really cohesive way.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is, go down to Flatbush. We've had massive investment in houses down there. You go to the local school, however, it was built for 750 kids. Today it's got 950 kids. The principal's in the corridor because his office is being used as the classroom, and every week 10 kids consuming ESL as a second language are needing to be resourced there. But it's been done in a really ad hoc way. You can't get a fire engine or an ambulance down some of those streets when cars are parked on both sides. So when we do this development, we actually have to do things in a very joined up way. And that's one of our big weaknesses in New Zealand. We're not thinking about how this all joins up in a master plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it doesn't stop there. The next item, or the next policy area that we're going to look at is poverty and income inequality. So poverty in 2017 was the second major issue for New Zealanders to deal with. Tell us about your party policies, please. And who would like? Christopher?
Yeah, well, what I'd say to you is it's not kind or caring just to talk about stuff and not get action. We can bang on about family violence and youth suicide and child poverty as we've been doing, but those metrics are only getting worse. And so fundamentally, the National Party does care about people. We care that each and every New Zealander should be able to reach its potential. But we want to go to a problem-solution kind of approach. And in this country, in our history, we do have the courage to name our challenges. We wrestle with them publicly, and it can be messy as we try and work our way through it. And ultimately, we do resolve it. You can go back through our history and think about the issues that we've dealt with over time. The thing for me is the single answer for us is to use what we call the social investment approach. And what that is to take a targeted view, not a universal view, of who needs the most help and how do we make big, powerful interventions in their life and spend immense amounts of money up front so that we can alter the course or the trajectory of where that life's going. I remember talking to Bill English, and he said to me, Chris, there was, I think it was a group of 50,000 kids that we knew today as young people, and we knew that 75% of them wouldn't complete high school. We know that 40% of them will be on a benefit by the age of 21, and if that happens, they're on welfare for the next 13 years. And we know that 25% of them will be in prison by the age of 35. Today, there is 1,500 5-year-olds that are in state care. We're going to spend $550 million in welfare and prison services over their lifetime. So if we're really serious about it, we want to be kind and caring, and we want to do something about it rather than just keep talking about it in this country, we actually have to really surgically solve those problems by actually investing very strongly and making powerful intervention in those people's lives. And that's the fundamental premise by which we actually have to manage inequality, and we actually have to deal with our atrocious levels of child poverty and deprivation. And I think taking that approach, which is a business-targeted, not a business approach, it's a data-driven approach, where our frontline community workers know those kids by name. They've had interactions with the criminal justice system, with social welfare, with healthcare, with education. We need to put that view together, and then we need to go help them and make powerful interventions. That's why you've seen us invest very strongly with our policy around the first 1,000 days. That's why we're investing a lot around education and what we're trying to do there as well.
Yeah, look, it's extremely important that, I think it's absolutely despicable that New Zealand has one of the worst child poverty rates in the world. But actually, since Labour has come into government, actually 7 out of the 9 worldwide recognised indicators, we've actually improved on child poverty. And right now, it is estimated that we've actually lifted 74,000 children out of poverty at the moment because of the data being slightly delayed. We haven't been able to see that come through. But what that means, I think, is really important, is exactly what Chris is saying. We do put our money where our words are, where our mouth is, and that is exactly what Labour has done. We've now provided free school lunches. You can't learn on an empty stomach. We all know that. But unfortunately, a lot of children has had to do that. And there's a lot of families who are on low income levels who can't afford the school donation, and we've banned that. And so it's about actually making sure that different areas and different aspects of that child's life gets looked after by our country and by this government, and so that they have all the right environment for them to thrive. It's about actually having access to healthcare. It's about making sure that their GP visits are cheaper. So we've done that as well. And so it's about able to be accessing mental health as mental health support people. And so today, actually, our Prime Minister has just announced that we will have a mental health support worker in every single primary school and intermediate. So it's about everything working together so that our children are able to thrive in our country. And then it's also about supporting their families. It's about making sure that their parents get a decent pay so they are able to be supported. It's also about being able to recognise the importance of iwi and hapu, and it's important to recognise our Pacifica communities and all the families that are supporting each other so that we bring in that respect and that for the culture, and to actually bring everyone on board to work out solutions together, and not just we give them hand them a solution in a very Western-centric way. And so it's about finding unique solutions for our country in a way that is only beneficial to, that can maybe only work in our country, and that's exactly what the Labour Party has done.
The fundamental difference is whether you believe in universalism or whether you believe in targeting and making powerful interventions. There's no reason why my 2 lovely children needed fees-free education for university. You know, I should be able to pay for that, and importantly, because we have them on an adult-child tenancy agreement where they've got to work 20 hours a week anyway. If they live at home, they're paying for it themselves anyway. Secondarily, why do my parents need a heating allowance? They don't need it, because if they do, I should be paying for that anyway. So I think, I'd sooner take those funds and actually invest and double up on the people that we could make the biggest difference
Chris,
with.
you are a very, very small amount of New Zealanders, right? You're at the very top 1% of New Zealanders in your income that you were earning, well, at least before when you were earning that. So not every single New Zealander is able to have that income level. So the majority of New Zealand don't have the privilege to pay for all of their children's education, to be able to afford their children's education, or their parents' superannuation that amount, or their winter energy payment, which is actually all at risk right now, because if National decides to cooperate with ACT, the ACT is actually vowing to scrap all of that. And so what we need to do is to make sure those incentives, those protection is there for our elderly, for our children, for everyone that is vulnerable, but for the whole entire New Zealand who have been hardworking, paying their taxes, so those services are there for them.
Chris, saying it was Chris's rostrum, you might as well finish, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but and I'm very fortunate and I've got all that stuff. But the point is, I'm saying to you, there is a lot of middle-income New Zealand that it's not particularly hot in Northland this summer on heating. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's just where do you want to put the money and where do you want to focus the spend? And where we should be focusing the spend is on the first 1,000 days. We know from the Otago longitudinal study, right? If we could fund a GP visit pre-birth, post-birth, we could do a 3-year-old test. If we could actually think about giving mothers 3 days postnatal care in a hospital, we want to be able to give every young mother and couple the $3,000 to
We've got
think
to
about
start
this.
with properly funding
No,
the healthcare system
but the
first, which is
$3,000
so
is the
underfunded
service that
at the
they need
moment.
to be able to have in order to be able to actually get the right needs for the development of their child. And for those that really need special needs,
And
$6,000
pay
to do
midwives a
that.
living wage, like a higher wage as well, right? Our midwives are chronically underpaid in this country. And so those are all the stuff that we have to actually get right before we're able to deliver the good services that you're talking about at the moment.
All right, thank you. So the next public policy question, law and order. Crime stats are up. Recently, Australia have deported 500 deportees to New Zealand, which means gang activity's up. We've got 1,800 new cops. How do we keep safe? So talk to us about law and order, and that'll be Naisi first.
Yeah, look, so I think law and order for me has actually been quite close to my heart because, like I said, I used to work for all of the district courts in Auckland and around New Zealand as well. And I've seen a lot of our children being, put into the criminal justice system quite unfairly, really. And what I see is that, so my fundamental belief is that everyone is a victim before they become a criminal. So whether those children are dealing with family violence at home, whether they're missing a father figure from their lives, whether they have never been able to actually go to school properly. And so that's why they get into trouble and they get, caught up in the criminal justice system. And so what the Labour approach has been is that we look at rehabilitation first before we look at punishment. And that especially is to do with our younger criminal offenders. And that is looking at, building rehabilitation wards in our prisons so that they get the right amount of care, so that they look into their drug and alcohol addictions and problems, so that when they come out of prison, they are less likely to reoffend and, get into parole problems and go back into prison. And so it's about looking at them being able to set them up for life outside of prison so that they get a chance at new life. But also it's about our criminal justice system without bias. It's about honouring our our treaty obligations as well in our criminal system. It's about being able to actually look at everyone in our community and to make sure that this criminal justice system is fit for all. But also we're really, really proud to make historical investments into the New Zealand Police as well. We're happy to put community officers into every single community. And then also it's about able to look after this community and to make sure that the police comes in and supports and the safety of everyone living in our communities as well. And also I think the other part that we need to talk about is also our prisons. The last national government actually did manage to privatise 2 of our prisons, and that's really a huge issue. That was actually one of the issues that made me decide to run for the Labour Party. It's because we need to make sure that our prisons are better looked after and all of our prison wards and all of our security guards are always paid the right amount of pay, but also that they are actually committed to make sure that our prisons are safe and that our prisoners do, like I said, at the end of their journey, make sure they're ready for the new world.
I think when you think about law and order, it's one of the things that the National Party stood for really strongly over a long period of time. And it's very simple to be tough on crime or soft on crime, but you've actually got to be really smart about crime. And at the heart of our core issue at the moment is methamphetamine. That is without doubt a very big problem. We have 14 kgs produced each week. That's 60,000 uses. I think it's about $16 million worth of social harm happening across this country each and every week. It's a huge, huge problem, right? And so we need 2 parts of that. One is we need a health-based approach so that we actually can help the user. There's a very good program called the Matrix Rehabilitation Program out of Adelaide and out of Australia. It's had up to 70% remission rates amongst users. We need to make sure that we've got detox beds and specialists in each and every DHB. But on the other hand, we also need to be able to disrupt the supply of meth, and that requires us to be very tough on the border. It means some big investments around drug dogs, very practical things, but very, very important sort of things. It also means that we've got to be investing a lot more in drug intelligence, and importantly, this is where the gangs come in, because the gangs are making money through meth, and that's what's fundamentally happening. And so we need a gang unit within our police operation to be able to be really tough on gangs and disrupt them. Why? Because these people peddle in misery and for other people, right? There is massive social harm and flow-on effects of that. So we want to make sure that we can give police powers, the firearm prohibition orders, in order to be able to stop gang members with accessing guns. We want to make sure that we can ban people wearing intimidating insignia, gang signature in public places. So for me, it's about working both ends of that equation. What I would say is that within the prison environment, yes, we want to continue to work on first-time remandees who often have drug or alcohol or mental health issues. And we ultimately need all our prisons to be working prisons, where all our prisoners are in education or in work or in training of some sort. And so there's a lot of work to do in this space, but it's not as simple as a false choice between being tough or soft on crime. You've actually got to be really smart about it.
Look, absolutely, and it's actually, for the 9 years that National has been in government, they haven't been able to do any of the promises that they've made. All they've done is actually change the criteria of the crimes, so to make the serious crimes actually a lot less, because the threshold for the serious crime has actually gone up. And so that there's a lot of these problems that we're facing that they've talked on and on and on about, but they haven't been actually able to deliver. And so for drugs, look, it's a lot of other issues involved as well. They have this ridiculous policy of the gang patches. What do you call a gang patch? Are you allowed to wear that when you wear that in public? How do you actually stop people from doing that? So it's about being actually really, really pragmatic about how we actually tackle those problems.
Yeah, all I'd say is there's been a 34% increase in gang members just in the last 3 years. It's a pretty phenomenal increase. We've had more gang members coming on the board than we've had police officers. The second thing I'd say is that under the national government from 2009 to 2015, we had almost a 60% decrease on a per head of population proportionately around meth use. So we do know how to do this stuff. We do know how to get this job done. Again, it's about getting back to root cause and working your way systematically through the chain in order to get a real outcome for people. And so, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Thank you. The next item, or next sector we're going to talk about is climate change and the environment. Judith Collins, on the 24th of September, was promising to undo the stupider stuff the Labour-led government had passed relating to the farming sector. So she's talking about changes to the Emissions Trading Act and the Zero Carbon Act. The Prime Minister called this backward-looking and hugely disappointing. The Greens said that this was anti-science and anti-climate. So tell us what your views on climate change and environment are, and I think we start with Naisi.
Yeah, look, I feel really, really strongly. I think everyone in my generation as a millennial would feel really, really strong about this, because we have to look after our environment in order for New Zealand to keep going. And we think that this economy should be making sure that we prioritise our environment. And what that means actually is to make sure that we look after the land, but actually we benefit from looking after the land. The whole entire New Zealand economy in terms of trading and export is actually relying on our clean green image. And if we don't live up to that expectation, then it becomes absolutely detrimental for our economy as well. So it pays, literally, to look after our environment. And what we've seen in the last 9 years that the National was in government was that we saw rivers that weren't swimmable. We've seen pollution in our waterways. And look, what I really want to say is we've got to give more credit to the farmers. If you follow Jacinda on Instagram like I do, you'll see her actually outside wearing her gumboots and her high vis on farms a lot. And so she's been out there in the last 3 years that she's been Prime Minister, talking with all of our farmers and to make sure that we find a solution for all so that we can make sure our rivers are clean, but at the same time that they can actually still handle all of the restrictions. And look, farmers are willing to make sure that their cattle are not pooing in our waterways, to make sure that what they're producing is also the best in the world as well. And then we've got our commitment to the 2030 all clean energy. And I think that is really bold and really exciting, because this is the time to do it. Not only is it a double whammy that it will create jobs with our investment into this clean energy, and the other party will probably tell you that it's going to be increasing, it's going to be a stimulant for increase of electricity, and that's just not true. We've had economists, we've had budgeting for this policy, that this is the right time, the technology's there, so that our environment really, truly gets looked after, and that once we open our borders to tourism, people come to New Zealand and find what they're expecting, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of land in the world.
So what I'd say is these guys really bag the two big parts of business, of our economy. One is small business, and the second is actually farmers. Over the last decade, farmers have planted 98% of the waterways that run through their properties and fenced that off. 17% now of our native forests sit on farmland. And I've been around and I've spent time on dairy farms, and I've gone and spoken to the top 1,500 dairy farmers at Dairy NZ and other places. And they are very committed and they care about the stewardship of the land like nothing else. But actually, it's our urban waterways that are a problem. 50% of Auckland's beaches are at high risk of closure last summer. Actually, 75% of our wastewater is actually breaching its resource consents right now, across the system. So it's a bit too simplistic just to beat up on farming and a bit too easy, frankly, rather than actually understanding the complexities that are involved in the investment that's taken place. We need to have a very practical, pragmatic approach to emissions. And I've done a lot of work in this space. I built the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. I drove Air New Zealand into a sustainable place. I founded the Climate Leaders Coalition with several other CEOs to work with James on building net carbon zero legislation in the long run. But just break down our emissions. 50% of it sits with our agriculture sector. If we could get best practice in those top 1,500 farms to the other 10,000 farms, we could maybe get halfway down there. And then you've got to have a conversation about ryegrass properties, breeding, feeding, optimisation, a whole bunch of things that you could determine whether you want to go down that road or not. The second big bucket is really around our transport. It's 20% of our emissions are in our transport, 18% of it's land-based transport. I moved the whole of Air New Zealand fleet to fully electric 6 years ago, right? This government has 12,000 cars in its fleet, and it's got 103 cars that are electric. We made a commitment as 30 CEOs to move a third of our company car fleets to fully electric within 2 years. So business is well ahead of the government on this. And so we've got a good EV policy, because why wouldn't we drive down an electricity route? We have 85% renewable electricity in this country. We're spending billions of dollars sending it offshore to get fossil fuels, and yet we could actually build out a whole industry around electricity as a result. And if we're really serious about it, EVs is a good start. And the other 30% is frankly about manufacturing and actually how we use our energy more efficiently and don't drive as much waste. So we've got to be quite pragmatic and get into problem-solution mode and do that. Our farming and agriculture sector is the most emissions efficient in the world. So if you actually if you increase cost and put them into an ETS, you end up having them pull back production, and then we'll go get that same food from other parts of the world where they're not nearly as carbon efficient. So you just got to. It's not as easy as that. You've got to actually work through the root cause of it and get beyond the motherhood and the platitudes and the buzzwords and get into the problem.
And look. And look, Labour's roadmap for sustainability future in our agriculture sector, actually we've costed out a $44 billion earnings for the agriculture sector if we follow the best practice of sustainability and cleaning up our waterways. There is real economic, tangible benefits when we clean up our waterways. And I think it's a bit thick for Chris to sit here and to talk about, the ocean. So it's actually the national government last term that in the Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary, it was them who actually shut down all of the conversations with iwi to provide that sanctuary. And actually it's Labour who's actually pick up all of those conversations to look at re-sanctifying our ocean to actually protect that. And so I think there's a lot of tanga, there's lots of treasure in our water, in our beaches, that we really do need to start to look at the sustainable way of cleaning everything up.
Yeah, what I'd say is New Zealand can be a world leader and export our thinking around practical, pragmatic emissions management. I was in New Delhi about a year and a half ago, and a bunch of business guys came to me, Indian guys. I was on an aviation global conference board, and they said to me, Chris, we've actually heard you've given personhood status to the Whanganui River. And I said, yep, we have. I said, I am the river is me. That's how we've actually done it. And they said, do you think we could actually do that for the Ganges? And I looked at it and I said, absolutely. I've been here 27 times and it's a pretty polluted kind of river. Why wouldn't you do that when you export a good idea like that around the world? But being practical, pragmatic, and getting the thing done and getting to root cause.
Is that a national policy?
What's that?
Cleaning up the rivers, like you said, like in that way. Have you made it a national policy?
It's a New Zealand decision that we've made to be able to bring a Maori thought of kaitiaki to look after our rivers, guardianship of people.
But over and over again, what we've seen is that National has refused to work with iwi, and we haven't been able to find that partnership going forward in practical terms.
New Zealand's work, yeah, we can go into a he said, she said, I get it, but I'm actually interested in the future and looking out the front windscreen. I can tell you right now the National Party has worked very well with all the iwi leader forums. I know them pretty well as well, and I can tell you there's some pretty constructive relationships sitting there.
All right, thank you. So the next area we're going to look at is the mental health issue area in New Zealand, which is a really serious issue. So perhaps you can tell us your views, please. I think we're going to start with Christopher.
Yeah, look, I know this area pretty well because my mum's a psychotherapist counsellor, and I've seen this all of my life, just seeing people struggling with mental health. The statistics are quite frightening. There will be 20% of us that will actually struggle with mental health at some point in our lifetime. In any given month, 9% of New Zealanders will tell you that they're having psychological distress. This has been a major issue of chronic underinvestment for over 30 years, and we need to take mental health as seriously as we take physical health. Our statistics are not good in this space. We need to be able to do something about it. So it's all about how do we put frontline workers where they need to be at the front line. And really for us as a National Party, how we're thinking about it is first and foremost, we need a dedicated minister of mental health, not subsumed as second class within the healthcare system, pulled out and actually mandated on itself. We want to make sure that we've actually got frontline staff and what we call navigators with every GP. We want to make sure that we're actually, initially even in the COVID environment, could we fund 100,000 free counselling sessions for people who are dealing with stress right here, right now, because it's been very, very destabilising. We've got a whole bunch of work around making sure we commit to the zero suicides, and in fact, Naisi, that's been a good cross-party piece, and a lot of this actually is about, irrespective of which government gets in, we need a plan that actually all governments can work towards over the long run in this space. So there's no doubt about it, we've got a lot of work to do in this place. Our young people are very important in this conversation because they have less stigma about it and they can talk about it more freely and help us actually work our way through these issues. So yeah, the bottom line is the Labour guys only spent 7% of the announced funding. They've only got 4% of GPs with actually mental health experts there yet. So together, irrespective of government, we've all got lots of work to do in this space.
Yeah, definitely agree that there is a mental health crisis, and I think what we need to do is look at mental health from the health sector, but then we need to look beyond that as well. And so just talking about the health sector, actually, like today we've announced that we'll put a mental health worker in every single primary school and intermediate school, and so that is already getting mental health workers out there to the people that need it most, which is our children, our next generation. But then it's also about looking at all of the other support. It's about properly funding NGOs, and it's about properly funding all of the service providers to make sure that they are ready to look after these people. And then it's about properly funding our hospitals and our healthcare system, which has been so chronically underfunded. We need to start rebuild. We're rebuilding Middlemore Hospital. It's leaking. There's asbestos. There's so many different problems right now that we've had to inherit. And so it's about getting all of those basic infrastructure right when we provide a good mental health service to our people. But then also it's about housing. It's about being able to find a community. It's about having your family around you to be there to support you as well. It's about having education, a future, something to hope for. And so it's about tackling all of these issues together, and that's exactly what Labour's doing at the moment, and we need to keep moving on that agenda. But today, look, I really want to talk about one thing that is really, really close to my heart. It's about training mental health workers, actually. And it's about getting the right amount of people. So within actually the Chinese community, what I've noticed is there's a huge demand for mental health services, but there's not enough counsellors, there's not enough mental health workers in that place. And so actually this COVID situation has actually put us in a 1 in 100 year chance to actually reshape our labour market or you know, the mental health working sector. And it's able for them to now, those people who may have lost their jobs because of COVID, to go and retrain and to make themselves, you know, capable of serving this new need that we see in our community, in our country at the moment.
And the only thing I'd put to you here as residents of Botany is that actually we need to get more health services in general into this electorate. You know, the biggest problem we have is a mindset problem in this electorate where we think of ourselves as small suburbs of Auckland. We're 130,000 people, and so you know, we want to know what are the services that we should be trying to bring in so you don't have to go outside this electorate to service them. I suspect we actually don't have sufficient mental health services, and there's certain areas where we really fall down big time. And so we need to be able to pick up this conversation as a community going forward about actually what do we need to invest in and what services do we need to secure here in Botany for our young people, but for all of us as we go forward.
All I can say is I agree to that. And I think, but in order for that dream to be realised, that vision to be realised, we need to be properly funding all of our DHBs. We need to make sure our healthcare system actually gets the amount of money. And look, to be honest, tax cuts are not the way there. Their tax cuts, and plus the $4 billion hole and the other new $4 billion hole, what that's going to make is to make sure that everything is underfunded. There has to be cuts to health services. There has to be cut to education in order for you guys to get the tax cut that we've proposed for the richer people of our country. And so we need to make sure there's adequate funding in our healthcare system before we talk about all of that.
So I think we're just getting a bit carried away with a lot of smears sort of just thrown around willy-nilly there. But,
$4 billion is not a smear.
No,
Everyone,
but-
that's actually being audited. Yeah. It's a $4 billion hole. That is not a smear.
Sure, yep, and so we've talked about that and we've faced up to that. But what I'm saying to you is our plan does work. You know, we actually have short-term tax relief. We're spending $1.8 billion on core social services, which is health, education. There's no cuts. It's just different from how you might be spending the money. And we're paying down our debt 8 years faster, which actually is good for our young people. So our plan does work, and we fundamentally do want to invest in core services in a way. But I can tell you for a start, put better health targets back into our healthcare system. At the moment, we used to have a target was that we expected 80% of people from diagnosis to be within 4 months to be able to get elective surgery. At the moment, those targets don't exist anymore, right? They've just gone. And so now you've got over 15% of Aucklanders not able to get the surgeries that they were promised with it. These kind of things matter. So you and I could spend money the same, but the reality is how we get more for it and actually how we make it work is really important. Too much tied up in bureaucracy, not enough getting into the front line of healthcare services.
But we all see the hospitals that are underfunded at the moment. There's mold growing in our hospitals, in Dunedin Hospital, and they haven't been, being able to get upgrades and being able to get pharmac funding. They haven't been able to get the equipment that they've needed. And so those things all play a really, really important role into our healthcare system.
Right. Okay. Let's thank the candidates for those answers. Moving on to the next item, which is transportation and not taxation. Transportation. So I spent 15 years travelling to the city from Howick, and I'm really pleased to have the privilege from working from home at the moment. For all the wrong reasons, but that's the reality. And obviously Auckland's got its problems, the country's got its problems, but Auckland's sort of the economic hub of the country. Why do we have such poor transportation infrastructure and solutions? So over to the candidates for their response, and perhaps, I think it's Christopher.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons I want to come into government because, we're running this country like it's 1975 rather than the country we want to see in 2040. And as a result, that requires us to invest properly in infrastructure. I've told this story a few times, but the Singapore government asked me to come and spend 3 days with them to talk about innovation. And I went up there and I met with, one of the guys I met was the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure. I stood in his 43rd floor office, I looked out over the windows and I said to him, mate, what's going on? He says, Chris, we're moving that port from here to there in 2030. He said, that freeway you came in from the airport turns into a fighter jet runway within 2 hours. He said, that desalination plant converts salt water into fresh water and we collect 70% of the grey water off the buildings. I said, I've been here 30, 40 times and actually you're always reclaiming land. He says, yes, we are. I said, I still see you've got lots going on. He said, yep. He said, we definitely have. He said, that'll be ready in 15 months, all those apartments, but the cool thing is the tube stop's built below, shrink-wrapped, ready to go, be plugged in, up and ready to go. So I leave him, go to the airport, brand new airport in Singapore, started from idea to completion within 4 years. I fly on an outstanding service from Air New Zealand to New Zealand, brilliant as it was. I arrive at the airport to find out that we're going to be bussed from the plane to the terminal, and 1 in 5 of our flights were because we haven't quite managed to build our terminal beyond 1981 when it was last built. You dodge your way through a construction zone, you jump into the car, and you head up George Bolt Drive, and I was stuck in traffic for 63 minutes. And I looked out round my window and I thought, it's really interesting, having left Singapore less than 12 hours ago, that what we're really good at in this country is putting cones out. We don't seem to do stuff, right? We don't fundamentally seem to be able to get things done. But when I lived in Chicago or Toronto, you go to work for 24 hours a day and you go 3 times faster so that you can free up that infrastructure so that you can make people's daily lives better. So we have a major, major problem on infrastructure. We have no master plan from the top to the bottom of the country, and that needs to go and last beyond 3-year election cycles, frankly, and we need to agree that rather than make it a political slush fund. We don't know how to fund it in terms of public-private partnerships. We actually have this regulation issue around the RMA, and finally you've got to ask, are we actually going to be any good, or are we world-class at doing it? And so I think, we have major challenges in this infrastructure space, and it manifests itself in transportation. So I'm passionate about it. This is one I could go 7 hours on, but I won't in the interest of time.
I really wish Chris luck and that he gets his policies through into the national, actual national party policies. So, because what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of lack of vision. So National has said, we're going to build this road, we're going to build that road, we're going to build this road. And that's all they've come up with. And look, transport needs a drastic overhaul, and that's, I think, something Chris and I both can agree on. And so that's something I think Labour's offered. And look, the solution, what Singapore has, rail. They'll be underground, and we want it to be on top of the ground, okay? And so rail is a huge solution to the problem we have, and it's not to build more roads. Look, if we're going to reduce carbon emission, it's going to be rail, okay? And it's about mass transport. It's about building like the busways. It's about getting rapid transport from Botany to the airport, right? It's all of those stuff is able to actually build those rail for New Zealand to keep New Zealand moving. And I think Labour Party in this last government, we've made really historical investments into rail. We've got Tuia, which is our train coming from Hamilton to Auckland already on the tracks, ready to go. And so I'm just really excited. I hope I can be on the first train there. I'm really into trains, as you can know, as you can tell. But for me, it's also about making sure that we have a proper system for public transport, and that's really important so that each mode of public transport actually joins onto each other. So we've got the bus lanes from North Shore, then we've got all of our rail networks coming in, and then we've got all of the intercity rail works. And let's hope that we'll push also light rail into airport as well, so that there's able to be that whole entire network. And I like how Chris talked about airport, getting back from the airport into Auckland City. Who built the Waterview Tunnel? It was the Labour government who actually had the vision to make sure that we put in infrastructure funding so that the Waterview Tunnel gets done.
I'm going to let that one go through to keep it, but because I'd like to hit that one for 6, but I won't. The bottom line is, let's just take Botany, right, for now. We've been talking since 2005 about building a 7.5-kilometre bus expressway, we call it the Eastern Busway, that links us from Botany to Pakuranga onto Panmure so that you can change to a train to take you into Britomart. The theory is that within 39 minutes you leave Botany Town Centre and you end up in the city. Great idea. Started in 2005. 2014, the Panmure train station finally gets built. Lo and behold, we then spend the next 4 years getting consenting and communication going on, and only in the last year have we started the Panmure to Botany leg. It's supposed to be finished in 2025. We all know with 4 more of the 5 stages to go, it ain't going to happen. But John F. Kennedy sent men to the moon, from idea to landing on the moon in 9.5 years, and in New Zealand we can't build a 7.5-kilometre busway from Botany to Panmure. We've got to call it for what it is. It's not good enough. It's not what you'd put up with in other 5 million people countries like Denmark or Switzerland or Ireland or Israel or Singapore. And so we have to be much better at this. We think we're great, we're only good, and we're only average, and we've got to get much, much better at it. And we've got to be more intolerant of it. That's just not good enough. Because we can't run this country like we're running it today. And that's why we've invested, and we want to invest $31 billion in serious infrastructure. We've talked about trying to link Whangarei with Auckland, with Hamilton, with Tauranga, because actually that's going to make it a really vibrant region within Australasia. And with our geography being so narrow and thin, it's a way in which we can pull together a sub-region and actually invest for the country that we want to have, not the country that we've been managing.
Look, all I can say is rail really is the answer, and it's not roads, okay? Look, we need to get rapid transport coming into Auckland, and we really need to make sure that we look for a low-carbon future, and that really, really starts with rail.
Yeah, and that's right. Rail is part of the answer. It's multi-mode is what you kind of need in terms of making a transportation system work. But just take a step back at the moment. We're under a water shortage because we can't plan out water needs. We've got a harbour bridge that actually is broken down and it gets shut down, and we're just all told to stay at home. The rails all of a sudden need urgent attention, and we couldn't get the trains in a week and a half ago. So you just look at the city's complete mess. You don't go into the city because there's 42 uncoordinated construction projects going on. So we really have to build the capability here big time, and it's something that we just... have to get much, much better at.
Right, big round of applause for both of them. So that's just the party policy issues. We've got lots of questions to ask you yet. Okay, I've got some questions I received from the public, so perhaps I can ask the candidates to restrict their responses to 1 minute and no right of response or reply. So this question came in. I was sadly made redundant in the first COVID-19 lockdown. So my questions are, what did each candidate do to support us during COVID lockdown? And how will they create jobs if they get elected? So, Naisi?
So this is not party? No, it's
correct.
just personal. Okay. Well, what I've done, I guess if we're talking about personal, I did actually set up the Aotearoa Chinese Legal Support Foundation, and that is to provide legal access to those who need it the most. And then also, I think through Foundation North, that I've been able to put a lot of my energy into making sure that our support goes out to the most vulnerable people. But also because I work in employment law, so actually a lot of my clients are the ones who have been actually made unfairly redundant during this COVID situation. And then I've also worked with a lot of small businesses who received the wage subsidy, by the way, that we've saved 1.7 million jobs as well. And so that from government subsidy, they're able to pay their employees. My clients are able to pay their employees correctly and to make sure that they cushion the blow and to keep those jobs. And so that's what I've been personally doing, I guess, in this first lockdown.
Yeah, look, it's a really tough situation. My son got made redundant as well, and so I could see what happened for him in terms of his confidence and where he was at dealing with that situation as well. And he's hustled and he's actually found another job, which is great. But it is a really, really tough situation, and sadly, we're going to see more of that in the coming year. And that's what I'm really fixated on, and that's why I'm being so serious about the economic management of this country, because fundamentally that is the way in which we actually have to move this forward. And I do honestly believe it's the fact that we've got those 2,500 businesses out in Botany. If we could get them each just to hire one more employee, what does that mean that they have to do? If you're a business owner, you've got maximum uncertainty. You're really unsure of the future. You need this consistent set of policies to encourage you to have the confidence to invest and expand your equipment and your business, and ultimately to be able to hire a new employee. So I know that might sound boring. I know it might sound very dull and turgid stuff, but it's actually the thing that actually powers us out of this mess that we're in. And it is tough. And I think what I'd encourage you to do is, there's a whole bunch of emotions sitting around the redundancy, and it's really important that you reach out and talk to people about it too.
Thank you. Next public question I received was around protecting our borders, which is a critical component of our COVID response. The government favours a multi-agency approach. National proposes a special border force approach. Can you tell us why one approach is better than the other? So perhaps Naisi?
Look, I think through this whole entire COVID situation, what we've managed to do is pick up at every single mistake that we've seen, and then we've actually learnt from it and improved on it and actually made it better and make sure that that doesn't happen again. And so that's probably the most important thing, is that we need to have consistency throughout the management of our border. And I think the Labour Party continuing on with that management is the right thing to do. But also what I'll tell you is that there has been a lot of talk of privatisation, and I'm actually quite scared of that, in terms of we don't know the level of service or the quality of service that private sector will be able to actually offer to us. That's a completely unknown, and we've seen mistakes made in Victoria, that it is the private sector and then privatised management of the border and of isolation that they've actually had those problems come through and made the second resurgence as bad as it is at the moment. So for me right now, it's looking at this government that we've picked up everything that we can do, and we've actually made improvements as we go. And it's about having a strong healthcare support system around it as well, so that we can do contact tracing, so that we can actually support all of the patients that we see right now coming through the border.
Why the border is so important is we need to make sure it's an iron dome around New Zealand, because it's got to be able to keep us safe. And that does mean that we've actually got to challenge ourselves and say, as good as our relative performance has been, is it truly world-class and the best? And there is other things that we can do to continually upgrade it. So I do think putting a border protection agency in place to coordinate a response, but to also hold people to account is actually really important rather than multi-agencies. We want to make sure that any visitor to this country is tested before they get on the plane, as well as a compulsory day 3, day 12 test. We've got to make sure that we have contact tracing for those that are actually involved with frontline worker. My son is actually in one of those managed quarantine facilities, right? And he's consistently, the testing's actually been very, very good. But we've got to continue to make sure that those border workers are actually working, are compulsory tested. I think we've got to use technology a lot more smartly than we have. Now, once you've got an iron dome around New Zealand, then you can put a drawbridge down, and then you can start to bring back returning New Zealanders. Then you can start to bring in essential workers and critical workers. Think about RSE workers. And ultimately, you work your way down to international students, and ultimately, you work your way down to international visitors coming from COVID-free countries. That's the pathway that might take us 2 or 3 years to get to, but you've actually got to start first and foremost with making sure the border's safe before we can then start to look about how we can do it, knowing that our system's robust, and we can then flood it with more people eventually over time.
Thank you. A question directed at Naisi. I think it's a compliment, Naisi. So, you stood for Labour in the blue seat of East Coast Bays in 2017 election. You're now standing in the blue seat of Botany in 2020. Are you a glutton for punishment? Or just a tough cookie? So anyway, you can comment.
I like that tough cookie. No, look, I really do think the people of Botany, people like yourselves, probably deserves, I guess, a second option and a different option, I guess. You can probably tell by the end of tonight that Chris and I come from a drastically different walk of life. Our age is very, very, I'm probably around the same age as your children.
As Ronald Reagan said, I won't hold your age against you.
Yeah, no ages in between us. But and I have a different, I can speak Mandarin as well, and I can serve an ethnic community in New Zealand. But also, I think strongly I bring in the next generation's thoughts, and I hope to represent that voice in Parliament as well. So I think it is about giving the people of Botany a different, another choice, and I think it's all up to you and your votes at the end of the day to decide whether who is the better person to represent Botany. But look, it's been extremely especially in this election, in this COVID situation, it's been extremely enriching to be able to connect with everyone and to hear all of your stories and to be able to know that New Zealand is just full of really, really good people, and this electorate is full of really, really good people.
Thank you, Naisi. And this one's directed at Chris. It's from an undecided voter. If he was in the position of Prime Minister for New Zealand at the time of COVID-19, was first detected in New Zealand, and with his current hindsight, what would his approach to the pandemic have been for New Zealand? For example, would he accept the alert level system as introduced at the time and put the country into alert level 4 at the end of 2020?
Yeah, look, I think we've got to, we could quibble about the past in terms of how we think we might have done it better, and actually you hear a lot of politicians doing that. I think it's just a Punch and Judy show, and it's pretty counterproductive, to be honest with you. I know the Prime Minister well because she asked me to chair her Business Advisory Council, and I think by and large, in the time with the information that we had, our relative performance, was proven to be pretty good. Would I like to have gone earlier on some things? Absolutely. Would I have gone harder on a few things? I'm sure. That's all too easy, it feels to say, with the benefit of hindsight. If I'm really honest, it sounds a bit disingenuous. So I think the answer really is about how we take it forward. And as I've articulated, I really think that border, we just need to be ruthless about the execution of delivering on what we say we do. And I can tell you, if I ran here in New Zealand with a little bit of sort of, well, those planes are kind of closely good enough tested, sort of, it's okay. It's sort of that sort of intensity that's kind of needed in execution to be able to get things done. And you can talk about it in a motherhood sort of thematic kind of way, but you've actually got to get into the detail and the execution and make sure you've got people that can do that and hold them accountable to do it. So I know I'm not answering the question per se, but I'm not sure it's the most useful or helpful way to think, for me to comment on it in that way.
All right, thank you. We've got some public questions.
Yeah, so there's a lot we've got to do on Botany, so be under no illusion. I'm not here to eat my lunch. I'm coming here to do things and to get things done. And the bottom line is this, is that we need a big mindset shift out here. We are 130,000 people today. That's bigger than Dunedin, it's bigger than Tauranga, and yet we still manage ourselves as if we're Cockle Bay, North Park, Flatbush, dormitory suburbs of Auckland. And we need to be much, much more intolerant of the services that we're not getting here relative to what I see happening on the North Shore, West Auckland, South Auckland. So be under no illusions, I'm deeply attached to Botany. There's a reason why I chose to run here, there's a reason why I want to be here, because there's 5 things we've got to do. One is when you have 2,000 businesses generating $3.5 billion and 30,000 employees, just in East Tamaki alone within our Botany electorate, we've got to make sure small businesses are at the heart of our recovery, and I mean that because I honestly believe that's the way we go forward. Secondarily, we've got to really deliver on this transport problem. We're paying higher levels of road user charge, we're getting nothing for it in return, we're spending 10% more time in our cars than the average punter, and we've got to deliver the Eastern Busway on time and full before we worry about what else comes next. We've got to get medical services and health services into this electorate. We're doing silly things like going to the Manukau Super Clinic or Middlemore when we could be getting those services inside this area, and if we're the size of Dunedin and Tauranga, why don't we get that? I want to see a community centre built in the Flatbush area because we've had growth but we haven't put enabling infrastructure around it. And finally, we've got to make sure that we manage the security and the safety of our people in Botany. People have worked hard to get here, and we've got to manage the safety and the security side of it. So they are the 5 commitments that I want to go to work on and make sure that we deliver for Botany. I think you can have a really effective local MP who's going to be championing Botany, and also have a player, hopefully, in a National Party government that can actually sit around that table representing our views. This is a really great electorate, and the perspective from this place needs to be represented well in Wellington at the seat of the decision-making table.
I think it's really important that we also recognise that all of the national policies affects everyone's lives, right, in Botany. And so a lot of that will get translated in the things that we see on the ground. You know, tax affects everyone here, and also healthcare affects everyone here, education affects everyone here. In fact, the local schools are getting $16,000 worth of investment, each one of them. And so there's a lot of things that I think would be really important to make sure that we've got the right government to lead the country, and so that all of those benefits gets applied to Botany as well. But specific to Botany, I think for me, it's always about creating a sense of community, and I think that's where there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of making sure that we do have a cohesive a system around the table, so that we have all of the NGOs, all of the charities, all of the social services, all of the government services being around at the same table, communicating to each other, so that there's one very good system in serving all of the people of Botany, and I hope to be the facilitator of that, especially when we see there's big infrastructure projects, big transport projects, big commercial developments as well. I hope to get everyone, including tangata whenua, iwi, to be on the table, to be in conversation with everyone. I think that's where change starts, and that's where I plan to be.
And was there another question?
Yeah, there's another question from one of our online streamers. China is our biggest trading partner. They also commit many human rights abuses. For example, and forgive me my pronunciation of this, Xinjiang, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. How should the government handle our relationship with China?
I probably, it's usually aimed at me. So look, New Zealand has a really, really strong foreign affairs policy, and I think for all of the stances that we've taken in New Zealand with China, I think are at the end of the day in the best interest of New Zealand, and we've always been really strong about what we stand for. Prime Minister visited China a year ago, and then she was able to bring up those topics as well. Look, but my personal view of, I think probably some people might want to hear, is that friends are the ones to influence. And I think it's really important that we have those honest conversations with China, but then there's no benefit in absolutely at a standoff and absolutely not talking to them, or, being at war with each other in terms of trade or any other way, but it's able to positively influence them. And so I've been privileged enough to be on the Youth Advisory Group for Philanthropy New Zealand, and what I've seen in this recent couple of years is that actually NGOs and charities in New Zealand have been able to actually go to China and teach them how to run their social service sectors and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's really, really important that we start to influence influence China in the right way and to send different social services into China to make sure that they get all of those things that we don't agree with on track while we maintain a really strong and robust trading relationship with them.
Yeah, look, the geopolitical context for New Zealand in the next 10 years is going to be one of the big things that we're going to have to navigate with great skill. The reality is that the world's moving from a superpower status to a multipolar status, and at the same time, we don't really have our global mechanisms working very well to coordinate our action. So you see US first, you see China first, you see India first, you see Brazil first, and a rise of nationalism and more nationalistic kind of leaders. And so the challenge for us is actually we need to maintain an independent foreign policy that acts in the interests of New Zealand, not just as subservient of anyone in that conversation. And that requires us to be able to understand there will be areas of trade and be under no illusion. It's often people say, oh, Chris, you know, we've got all our eggs in the China basket. The reality is this is 20% of the global economy. This is the number one trading partner for 150 of the countries on Earth, and it's number 2 for the other 45. Yet, what we've got to be able to do is to be able to build relationships so that we can convert the commercial opportunity that sits there, but we have to have the courage of our convictions to stand up for the principles and the rights that we believe in. And when we see human rights impinged, we've got to be able to move to a mature relationship that's adult to adult, not parent-child, in terms of how we actually converse with China. We can do both. It is hard, but it requires skill. And we have to navigate a world that's actually, for a little country, quite difficult to do, but we can do it.
All right, so now we move to the audience question section of our forum. Are there any, Warren, questions that you've got there? Okay, that's great. All right, so we're going to throw it open to the floor. So there's a lady at the back. Yes, please. Can you just use the microphone?
Hi. I'm really interested to know, we've heard a lot of talk about policies for the parties, but I'm really interested in Botany, and I'd like to know more about what you individually would bring for businesses operating in this area. And obviously there's been talk about the economy and loss of jobs and things like that, but I'm interested in hearing specifically about what you guys would do as candidates for those businesses that are struggling, because those are the people that are also employing people and struggling to continue to thrive in this challenging environment.
So, great question. Perhaps 1 minute each, because there were a lot of hands that went up. So, perhaps Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been and visited hundreds of businesses over the last 10 months across Botany because I believe it's about the real economy, it's people and their livelihoods. And you know, what those businesses need, as I've said before, is consistency to policies. When you look at it, you know, there are some real practical things we need to do, right? We need to be able to look at tax compliance and costs. These are all technical things. For many of you in the room, you're going to be glazing over, but they're real practical things that actually make a difference. We need to look at things like e-invoicing so that we can improve the cash cycle for businesses in Botany. We need to be able to reduce some red tape that doesn't make a lot of sense. The RMA, the anti-money laundering kind of stuff that gets in the way of a lot of people doing business. So it's just actually waking up each day and saying, what can I do as the MP that actually makes things go faster safely? And I think that's the challenge, is that sometimes we haven't seen that over the last 6 months. You know, that's surely our job, is to wake up and say, how do I unblock it? How do we move it forward? So that's why I want to be a representative MP. That's why I want to be here in Botany, because that community of small business owners will keep us accountable for saying and give us really practical things that we need to do to make their life much better.
Yeah, one of the benefits of being a millennial, I guess, is what I call myself an internet native. So I was born in the age of internet. And look, I think being on the internet is a really, really exciting place to be, but it's also a really, really strategic place we have to be in economically. And so hopefully I get to bring in that perspective of being able to have an online business, e-commerce, of being able to set up an influencer economy, which maybe some of you are unfamiliar, which is KOL, key opinion leaders. So being able to actually navigate the space of Instagram and YouTube, and being able to profile Botany businesses in that space as well, but also diversity makes us stronger. In this electorate, there's so many different diversity of ethnicities, which I don't see as much communication. So I hope to bring everyone to the table and to use our business connections into different countries, into our homeland, to be able to bring about and bring alive trading, and also to make sure that we all navigate this crisis together and to make our own individual knowledge of business be a collective one.
Thank you. Gentleman behind.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just I got a question for mainly for the Labour Party. So just wanted to ask you a question. I run a small business in Ishtamaki. I got 18 staff, and I had a big issues with when we had a COVID-19 problems, and we had a lockdown level 4, which we shouldn't be in lockdown level 4, being a construction side business. We supply marble and granite for bench tops, for making bench tops. So we don't need to be in lockdown. Okay, you guys made me to be in sitting at home for 5 weeks. I did that. The wage subsidy didn't help me at all, nothing, zero. Because the reason is the wage subsidy you gave is $565, including the tax. We pay $2,000 a week for the wages for most of our staff. So it doesn't help me at all. Rather, you would be gone to ACC, fund that 80% to them, and we would be sitting without paying that. You don't need to be paying us. That's okay. We had that all issues. We came out. And now you made me one more sleepless nights problem, which is the biggest one, is double sick leaves. So you just imagine, I got 18 staff comparing. If I calculate that, I'm paying $32,000 a year, and I'm not making any money out of the business. And there's one more holiday, extra holiday, which is not going to help my business at all. And then you increase 6% extra on my income. Even today, I can't afford to buy a house in Botany. I'm still renting the house at the moment. So this is not helping my business at all. So how can we, being a businessman, how can we live in this situation? And the one more thing I would like to explain is a tree. What the tree is doing for the environment. It's just a tree. What is the tree doing? It's giving the oxygen. It's giving a shelter as well. This is the same thing. The employer is the same like a tree. If we are dead, the business is dead, there is no employee, all right? There is no labor. Labor means a worker. Worker is an employee, so there won't be an employee. Don't kill the businesses, all right? My last one is that one more I need to ask, because I can't speak to Jacinda, a prime minister, but I can speak to you. I'm really thankful that you are here now. So there's one more last one is like, you're paying $450 for wage subsidy, $450 for unemployment benefit, okay? I am short of one staff. I advertised 3 weeks ago. Until today, I couldn't find a labor to work for just doing a warehouse work. So reason for that, I found it, is if I hire someone, I'll be paying $20 an hour. It's 40 hours, $800. After tax, you'll be getting $650. You paying direct to their accounts $450. And if he gets $650 from me, he has to spend $50 to come to work, $50 for his lunches a week, and he's extra making $100 only. For that $100, no one is coming to jobs.
All right, can we just stop it there?
So how can you make them to come to work? This is the main thing. Are you going to stop doing that $450 a week? Are you going to be making them to come to work? I even applied at Work and Income, MSID website as well. Even that's not helping as well. I applied 3 weeks ago. Not even one application has came.
That's fine. We've got to give Naisi the chance to respond the way she wants to.
Thank
respond.
you. Thank you.
So I think there's a couple of things to unpack, and look, COVID is just a really difficult situation, and there's a lot of challenges that we're all facing. I'm a small business owner myself. I've had to lay off staff as well during this after the wage subsidy has ended, and so there's a lot of things that we need to navigate together through as a nation. And look, the wage subsidy scheme is there, and it's cushioned the worst of blows during the first and the second lockdown, especially once we're in Auckland for the second lockdown. It's there to make sure that we don't have to lay off employees straight away, and that has proven that 1.7 million jobs are being saved. And look, there's also another thing that we need to talk about is the fact that the wage subsidy and everything that the government is trying to do is just to cushion this blow and is to get us through this moment right now in time. And then it's about growing the economy. Like in the construction industry especially, we're putting so much resources into training apprentices, right? And so the government is actually paying employers to actually take on apprentices so they get the right skills, so that there are more carpenters, there are more workers, there are more different trade skills and abilities to actually work and to actually respond to those job advertisements as well. So it's about resetting the economy in a way that there's more jobs for everyone. Yeah, it's to incentivize them to get training first so that they're ready for work and for a work that they're passionate about, for a future of their own. So it's really important to get really specialized training for them so that they're able to work.
Mr. Luxon? Yeah, Christopher,
I mean, you got to the nub of the issue with what I was trying to say before. If you're going to have an extra Matariki public holiday and you want 5 extra days of sick leave and you want a minimum wage in place, lovely when the economy's growing at 3 to 4%. Awesome thing to do. We'd all like to do it. But not when it's growing at minus 12% as it is today. Because what's going to happen is, what are your choices at the moment? You're going to put your prices up, or you're going to try and save costs, and you're going to put more people out of work and put them into unemployment. And you sure as hang aren't going to go off and invest in more capital to expand your business to be able to hire more people. So you've got right to the nub of the issue, because the fundamental problem is we talk about 200,000 people unemployed, but we have a major shortage of workers in our horticulture industry right here
Christopher,
today.
I think the gentleman was asking for a solution for his problem more than the big picture. So if you want to respond, perhaps you could respond to his question.
Yeah, well, I think the issue is you've got to be able to invest in business, opening up business to be able to take those hires on board. But we've also got to be able to attract some skilled workers that we don't have in this economy. Because it's amazing, no Kiwi kid wants to go pick fruit. So what's wrong? The incentive is too much to sit there at home and do nothing at the moment. That's the harsh reality of it. We don't like to hear it, but you can't get
seasonal workers through the border at the moment.
Not enough.
We're working on that.
Not enough. You're working on it, but you're always working on it, gonna, but not getting it done. No, that's not true. It's not true. So,
All right. Right, there's a question. Yeah. Yep. Oh, yes, yeah, correct.
Hi, this is a question for both parties. I've been here, I came from Singapore, I've been here for over 30 years. I really like New Zealand, but I'm finding that the crime rate, as you say, is going up and child poverty is going up. And I know that the government has tried, investing in child poverty by giving free lunch and also lots of free hangout, but the problems keep growing. So have any of you party thought of the roots of, all this that is happening? Have you thought of, actually, the family is very important? Is there any investment in the adults in the family? If you give free lunch to the kids, but the family, when they go home, they are not fed. So my main concern is that in New Zealand, you are very good in giving out money, but you are not actually educating the parents. And it is very important that the parents are educated so that they can support the kids. So how about some free courses for especially young parents, like parenting courses or budgeting courses? I think that is very important. Otherwise, you'll never solve the problem. You keep growing and it will not solve the problem.
yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, this country has to be built on a notion and a social contract of rights and responsibilities. We have tremendous rights being a New Zealander, but we also have responsibilities to raise our kids and to do the very best we can in building strong families and good, healthy, independent adults ultimately. We've made a big investment around what we call the first 1,000 days. And as I was trying to say before, by giving every new set of parents $3,000 to work out the kind of services, it's not $3,000 cash, it's a $3,000 credit to spend on services that they might need to strengthen their relationship, their bonding with their family. Amanda and I spend a lot of time doing parent youth camps, right? And we've done a lot of work with Parenting Place. And I look at the toolkit approach that they've run 250,000 people through that actually gives parents just some really basic tools on how to think about parenting their children as they move through the different life stages, right? To be able to go from dependence to independence. And I think there's scope for us to be able to put that work into that first 1,000 days as a result. We want to create a national child care institute and research centre, and I think those are the sorts of things that we've got to start getting quite creative, and they're quite exciting because we've got to be able to work on those challenges and be able to educate people to be able to be better parents and ultimately to be able to live a life of rights and responsibilities.
Look, I think it's really, really important that we look at a child through their growth and their whole family, and I totally agree with you and with Chris in that family is really a really important unit in our community. And with family, actually, what Labour, I've been really, really proud that we've been able to do is to actually increase maternity leave and to actually make sure that the parent gets to spend more time with their children after they're born and to be able to actually have that bonding time. And we know that that time is actually really important for the rest of the life of the kid in terms of their physical health and their mental health. So that's been a really, really significant move. But also it's about, packages for families, it's about working for families, it's all of those things that are there to support a family being together and being able to give their child the best possible start to life. But also if you look at a child and if you look at everything, you look at their education, because, the children of today are the parents for tomorrow, right? And so if you teach them and if you give them the right tools and paths to life, then you're able to set them up well for life, that they're able to get a job, they're able to buy a house. And look, it goes back to housing because I think it's so fundamentally important that you have a place to live. But also you address historical inequalities as well. A lot of these families are broken, they're unable, they're living in poverty because of a lot of historical reasons where in history their land or their tribe or their ethnicity has been discriminated against. And so there's a lot of things that we need to address at the root of the course as well.
All right, thank you very much. Now, thank you for that question. I'm only just going to take one more from that gentleman there. We're just going to take a question from that gentleman there, and we're going to have to wrap up. Apologies. The people will be here. The people will be here for you to talk to afterwards. So, sir.
Labor didn't win the last election. They're only there because of Winston Peters and his determination that there were people in the National Party he could not get along with. In the first 2 years of this Labor government, they struggled to do anything competently. They failed in a lot lot of promises they made. COVID came along, and it has been good for National because they're riding a wave of popularity now because they have handled COVID reasonably well. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Yeah. However, COVID is nearly behind us now. What assurance can you give us that once we come out of COVID, these people that couldn't do it before COVID are going to be able to do it after COVID?
I'll start with the first part of the question, which was MMP, and that is the system that we've agreed with. But I think what it shows is that over half of New Zealanders disagreed with National keep leading, and so that's why they voted for all of the other parties. But then there's the other problem of what we've done, I guess, in the first 2 years or 3 years. And we've made significant investments in the areas that have been so chronically underfunded. It's our hospitals, it's our schools, it's our healthcare system, it's a housing problem. We've built 5,000 state homes and we're going to build 8,000 more. And so there's a lot more that we have to do. So we have to keep on moving and we have to make sure that this economy, I think, COVID is not going to go away anytime soon. So we need to make sure that out of this crisis comes an opportunity, and that is to reshape our economy and reshape the way that our nation is built. And that's through providing jobs. It's through future-proofing everything that we have right now. And that is about looking forward into sustainability, about looking after the environment, cleaning up our waterways, and we just can't stop right now.
Can I comment on that?
Briefly. Then.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are abysmal at execution, right? I mean, they, light rail, Kiwi Bill, child poverty, family violence, whatever. Yep. personal view, yeah, but I'm just saying to you, so I don't trust them to be able to take us forward in the way, because that kind of matters. Execution matters at the end of the day.
We're tackling really big problems.
Yeah, but we've got to get beyond the buzzwords, the platitudes, and all the sloganeering, and actually get in and actually get things done. The country needs to get moving, and it needs to be able to get things done really, really well. And only,
Right.
Nationals proved that to you over the last economic crisis that we've dealt
Thanks,
with.
Christopher. We're going to... Apologies, but we can't take any more questions from the audience. What we're going to do now is ask the two candidates to give their closing statements for about, let's make it 2 minutes this time. But before we do, oh, actually, no, we'll get them to do that. Why don't, who would like to go first? Christopher?
Well, can I just say thank you to Llyod and, for hosting the session. Can I also say thank you to Naisi? It's actually been good to be able to canvass a broad range of topics over the evening. What I'd say to you, though, is ultimately all of what we've been discussing is lovely, but it ultimately all boils down to one single issue, which is the economy, and how it affects you, your family, the community, and also who you think can best take us through in the next 3 years. It's the economy, and you may not like to hear those words because it often is dry and abstract and boring and dull, but it's actually the economy that gives us the cash to be able to invest in the public and social services that we all desperately want to see. If we don't have the income and the growth generating the money, we can't do any of it. So we really have to address that issue. It has been an incredibly tough year. We have 200,000 people on unemployment today, and we're probably likely to have another 200,000 come on unemployment in the next 12 to 15 months. And so the bottom line is we owe it to those people to get them a job. That is the priority, that's the core issue right here, right now. Now, the economy that I experience daily is actually one about people and livelihoods. It is those hundreds of businesses that I've visited with over the last 10 months here in Botany. Those people care deeply about, the business owners care deeply about their people, and they've struggled through lockdown. And so for us, it's about private enterprise is going to power us out of this. Not lots of well-intentioned, theoretical, career politician ministers thinking about make-work schemes. That's what's actually going to get it done. It's that extra Botany person business hiring that extra worker. What these businesses need, therefore, and maximum uncertainty, as I've said before, is a consistent set of policies. And I think National provides that hope with the plan that we have, whether it's our tax package, our small business package, our infrastructure and debt management, whether it's the work that we want to do on skills and infrastructure. I believe New Zealand has a great future ahead of us, but the next 3 to 5 years are absolutely critical. And the challenge for that is that it requires responsible economic management. I think National has proven that in times in our past, and we're ready to do that again. So I want to say this Saturday, early voting opens, and I'd encourage you to tick two ticks blue and make sure that we happen to our future rather than have it happen to us. Thank you.
It's been an absolute privilege tonight to stand in front of you all and to share some of the things I think that are both close to mine and Chris's hearts, and in terms of our vision for Botany, but also our love for this country. And I'm glad that I think we share that passion tonight. And just want to thank the church and also everyone here coming out tonight on a Tuesday night to hear politicians speak. That's not usually the most entertaining way to spend your Tuesday night. But having said that, look, I think it is really important that in this COVID-19 pandemic, we have actually faced something. We are at a crossroad at the moment, and we can either come out of the pandemic as a better country, as one that is fairer, as one that we have more younger people in education and in training, and with a really well-equipped and well-diverse set of skills and labourers in our economy, or we can come out as being the same old that we had in the past. And look, I think it's really important that we start putting in those investments for our next generation. It's about making sure that our economy is future-proof by making sure it's sustainable. It's about working towards a greener future. It's about making sure that we don't just take from the land, but we give back and we protect it, and we make sure that this land that we stand on here is the one that makes us be proud of who we are in the future, that New Zealand really does keep up our image and our obligations to our next generation as well. And for me, it's also about creating a really good sense of community around everyone. It's about making sure that we have mental health support in every single school. It's about making sure that we work with everyone together, with iwi, with all of our partners, to make sure that this future, there's a place for everyone. So we've got to keep moving. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much. We've actually gone over a little bit, but can I ask the audience, is anybody still undecided about who they're going to vote for? All right. You've whittled the numbers down, so you've won some votes, so congratulations to you too. But let me start by saying that the two candidates are of incredible quality. After spending many years standing a rostrum like this, the people that are here, the candidates from Labour and National, are of, as I say, wonderful quality. They bring some ambition for us as a Botany electorate, so thank you for that. They're also ambitious for New Zealand and for the future. So we're very pleased to have that as well. They talked about, I suppose, root cause remediation, and I suppose building the future for, as I say, for the young. So those are things that are very close to our hearts. Whatever happens, we know we'll be in good hands because both of these will represent Botany in a big way and perhaps in a small way very well. And I want you to join with me in thanking them once again in the usual fashion. We have Richard Waugh.
Just to round off, folks, can we express our appreciation to Llyod Wong, our moderator, who puts a lot of background time into preparing with the candidates. Also to the tech team, if you turn around you'll see them, they've been running the slides and everything. And you are welcome to gather in the foyer, meet the candidates again, and if you want another cup of tea or coffee, you're very welcome. Thank you.